Jane, thanks so much for joining me here on the Open Minds podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you because immigration is one of the hot topics in today's news. And I feel like a lot of Canadians just don't know the process of getting to Canada. And with your 20 years experience, I wanted to start by asking you, what's the process like specifically for international students who are attempting to come to Canada and start their lives here?
First of all, thank you for having me here, and hello to everyone. So what is the process for the international students? So maybe before getting to the process itself, it would be a good idea to realize that this is a foreign person who is living in a remote country, and if this country is England or Austria or Italy, it's one thing. Mostly the countries are the third world countries. So these are people who are living in a totally different environment, conditions, and even if they are children of a wealthier or more well-to-do parents, they are still living in the country where they were born. So they are still seeing whatever is happening around them. And they conceive this idea, or their parents conceive their idea, or if they are older, they want to continue their education. They conceive the idea to be educated elsewhere. When
Mm.
they think about this elsewhere is so remote and so foreign. They have no clue about it. So the idea itself requires quite a lot of capabilities on the person's behalf. The person has to be able to communicate in English on a certain rather high level. So therefore,
Mm.
the English command has to be good, or has to be learned, or needs to be learned to be good, right?
Mhm.
Secondly, the person needs to realize that there would be a considerable amount of money
Mm.
associated with this undertaking. And this amount is really very considerable. I will give you an example.
Mhm.
1 year of studies in a Canadian college, 1 year program, would cost you in average $15,000.
Wow.
Plus, they have to pay for all the textbooks. On top of it, before December of 2023, the Canadian government required each international student to show that they have at least $10,000 on their bank account aside of the tuition fee in
Wow.
order to sustain their living in Canada. It was a mandatory requirement. Since January of 2024, the amount has doubled. So
Wow.
you have to have $15,000, roughly $15,000 to pay for your studies per year. And usually first-time students who are undergrads, they go for 2 year programs. So let's say $30,000
Wow.
plus textbooks, plus now $20,000 per year to just sustain your living. So
Wow.
we're talking about a serious amount of money, which
Mhm.
those who have conceived the idea of studying in Canada, they would either have it, and they would be very privileged to have this amount, because it's a large amount of money even for us Canadians.
Mhm.
But for those in the third world countries, it's an enormous amount of money, correct?
Yeah.
They would go and they would look for it through
Mhm.
sometimes I had clients whose grandparents were dreaming of their grandchildren to become more than just they were, or their kids have become. So they would leave whatever they have accumulated through life for the education. I have seen
Wow.
cases like that. So these
Wow.
people would be clearly tapping into some serious savings, unless
Mhm.
they are privileged and their parents could help them. So this is first. So they would all find out, even if they find a college anywhere in the world, and then they end up with finding a college in Canada that they like, they would see that the price, the cost of the program per year. So they would face this necessity, the financial necessity right away.
Mhm.
Okay. So and after they have seen it, and let's say get satisfied that they can actually furnish throughout themselves or throughout parents or grandparents the cost of the studies and residing in Canada, they would need to look into applying for the study permit. And this is another story on its and the story of its own, because it's a very widely known fact in the world of immigration that 60% of the applications for a study permit of foreign workers would be refused.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Why?
we have dealt with so many here of the application, whether these clients would come to us and we would represent them right away, or they would come to us after the refusals. Very often you fight for your study permit. And very often this fight takes not only a lot of your emotional effort, but also a huge amount of your financial uh, expenses, because if you hire a professional, you have to pay. I will give you a very interesting example,
Yeah.
because it's a rather fresh example. That's the one that just came to my mind as I was answering the question. So this lady was Armenian from Syria. So when the war has started in Syria with her family, she moved to Armenia and received the Armenian passport.
Hmm.
Her father has been historically a well-known and very successful builder in Syria. So her brother, who was the son of her father, took the knowledge of in the construction industry from her father. And when they came to Armenia, and they came with a significant amount of money, because there were a lot of wealthy people in Syria,
Mhm.
they started a construction business. So the lady has not been associated with the business, but when we were and she came to us, we were the first ones to represent her. She didn't do it herself.
Okay.
So we showed that she was working in a very successful company, American-owned company in Armenia. She was getting a very good salary. Her brother and her father were furnishing, in addition to her salary, were fully furnishing her studies in Canada. And we very clearly explained why she was coming for the international business, because her plan was to join the family later in the business, because they were growing the business beyond the borders of Armenia.
Hmm.
We were refused. I couldn't believe
Wow.
my eyes, and it was the most exhaustive package. We were refused. She was, and we was refused super stupidly. They were in the refusal explanation. They were contradicting the facts that were actually from the beginning in the application package.
What?
So she was insisting on reapplying, and I told her, they have made such stupid mistakes that we would rather not resubmit the case. We would rather appeal it to the federal court. We appealed it. They settled. Immigration settled with us. The girl ended up here. She is now in the college. But I am talking about a lady who had all the financial resources to do it, and I'm talking about me, who has every expertise in the world to put a very strong application together, and my case was refused. It was
Wow.
initially approved, but how much time and emotional journey and money it took from this foreign student. So they meet at the stage of preparation, and in case they can go ahead, they can afford going ahead, they meet with million of questions, and the challenges start right there at the very inception of this journey.
Jane, there's so many questions I have. This is so incredible. I want to go back to the student from Syria. The What was the reason why the federal government initially refused it? Was it just mismanagement of the file itself, or was there a political ulterior motive?
Okay, I can talk about political ulterior motives all day long, specifically about Syria, and I will talk it a little bit later. But the situation is such that very often the reasons for the refusal are literally described in 3 sentences, and they have nothing to do with what was in the package. The
What?
contradiction of we just won a case from a Pakistani, this is actually not a student, but really interesting, from a Pakistani lady who has 4 siblings in Canada, super successful family. and two siblings back in Pakistan, bachelor degree, a manager. She applied for the visa to come to Canada 4 times. The last time she applied, her father was dying. So the father was living in Canada and he was dying. They refused her, and after that she came to us. And I told no, she through her Canadian sister, and I told this lady that we should absolutely reapply, because without reapplying, we wouldn't have the ground to appeal. But I told her, I am putting the best possible case together. Be prepared. It's 99.999% they would refuse,
Wow.
and then we will appeal it. So what happened? That just happened actually. In the refusal letter, everything that we have said in the package was cited in contradiction to. So if we were saying that she has a big family in Pakistan, that she has her husband and two kids, one child in a medical university, that she has a very good job working as a manager in a company, I don't remember what kind of company, that she is active within the community. In the refusal, they said that she has two huge family in Canada, but has no family in Pakistan.
What?
And that she would never return back, that she is asking for the visa without any intention to come back. So all these kids who are in Pakistan, her husband, her home, her full-time work, her other two siblings, her community participation, active, her assets that she has, they didn't count. They just overlooked it, okay? And they said that because she's having this big, actually, she has quite many family members in Canada, that she would remain in the country. So they knew that it would be refusal. I knew it would be refusal. On top of it, in the refusal, they have the obligation to mention that they used the artificial intelligence. They don't call it artificial intelligence. They call it a tool, assessment tool, which is called Canuck.
Okay.
So in that refusal letter, they mentioned that Canuck was applied in making the decision. So, but
Okay.
we know it's AI, and we
Yeah.
know that why this AI was created. We took it to the federal court, and in the federal court, we had the offer to settle within literally 2 weeks. 2 weeks, because we
Wow.
showed to them that they contradicted on basic points, and it's actually a shame. So going back
Wow.
to your question about the Syrian girl, you asked me why she wanted to come to. Can you please kindly repeat the question?
Yeah. The question was, did they refuse this Syrian student because of just malfeasance in the government, just not checking their boxes, or was there some political ulterior motive?
Okay, I think that in the refusal of this Armenian girl, there was no political motive.
Okay.
No, but it exists. And
Okay.
I can tell you for sure, because we just won a case in the federal court, there is a very, very serious prejudice and bias towards Armenians in Lebanon. And
Wow.
the only Canadian visa mission that serves Syrians is in Lebanon.
Wow.
And this relates to people who are either claiming refugee, being sponsored by the Canadian groups, Syrian people who are claiming refugee being sponsored by the Canadian groups, who are being processed in Beirut, in the Canadian visa mission in Beirut.
Hmm.
Okay, or I had a case when a Syrian man who lived in Lebanon after he fled from Syria was refused to come and be with his wife. And I was appealing it through the Immigration Appeal Division. They refused. She was pregnant.
Wow.
They refused him on the premise that he was not coming because he loved her, but she was sponsoring him because they had another child, fully ignoring the fact that she was actually pregnant with their second child.
Wow.
Okay, so
Wow.
he actually came maybe 3 weeks ago to the office physically. It took them time to, even after we won the case, to process him for the PR. So there is a prejudice.
Ah.
And we are now fighting for one guy who was refused a sponsorship from the Canadian group of his Syrian friends from the church, and we just offered a settlement, but we don't want to accept it from them.
Wow.
So for sure, there are cases where there is prejudice, but not necessarily always, at all.
Jane, you mentioned Armenians in Lebanon.
Yeah,
What's the political or prejudice towards Armenians in Lebanon? Such a specific group.
Syrians in Lebanon.
Sorry, my apologies.
Syrian.
Syrian. Yes.
Yeah, I cannot explain that. I cannot always be able, I'm not capable always to explain the ground for prejudice or the ground for bias. It's beyond me.
Mm-hmm.
I do not understand why somebody would have privileges and the other one would not. You just have to look into the core of the case, and
Mm-hmm.
they should be looking into why these people fled from Syria,
Yes. Yeah.
and most of them fled from Syria due to the war. They were terrible, frightening stories. I've seen so many of them. So, but unfortunately, when they designate an immigration officer, I don't think that absence of prejudice is necessarily can be assessed.
Correct.
Can be assessed, right?
Correct.
Same goes to gays, right? I've had cases when a gay couple, which is usually well accepted here, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we understand in Canada that gay rights are very much tarnished, right, throughout the world.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a situation when a gay couple was seriously prejudiced, and we had to fight for them as well. So they are
Wow.
human beings. What I always tell my clients,
Mm-hmm.
immigration officers are as humans as we are.
Mm-hmm.
They have their own race, they have their own upbringing, they have their own world outlook, and when they retain or when they hire an immigration officer, I'm sure they don't ask them these specific questions. They just want them to understand how law works and how well they know the manuals, the operational manuals.
Jane, do you think that's why government pushed for artificial intelligence and other tools, because maybe they saw some bias, but not recognizing that the AI itself has its own inherent bias too, and it can make major errors in how they assess cases as well?
I have such a huge problem with this Canuck.
Mm.
Uh, and I will explain to you why. I understand why they have done it, because they are physically not capable to
Yes.
process the incredible amount, hundreds of thousands of applications which are in the backlog.
Yeah.
But this artificial intelligence has no intelligence.
Mm.
Okay, and I am not taking anything from the genius of those who have created it or who continue creating it, but
Yeah.
we assessing immigration cases, you need to have intelligence, and you also need not only to read the facts which are in front of you, but also to put them against the test that is put in front of the officer for the purposes of the understanding of how the case has to be assessed. So there's a test to every kind of immigration case, right?
Mm.
And there are so many cases, so many programs that are run by the Canadian ministry, and to each and every one there is a test. Therefore, these manuals exist, but between the lines, right,
Mm-hmm.
there is so much that they should read, which is written between the lines. How much can artificial intelligence grab?
Mm-hmm.
So they not only ignore it, they just don't see it. So maybe this
Wow.
artificial intelligence is not intelligent enough. Maybe they should work on improving it. But what we are seeing is appalling,
Hmm.
and it's disturbing, and it's very disappointing, because so much money are being spent on these tools which are at the end of the day not working. Just like I'm sure you heard this the app that was created by Air Canada,
Yeah.
where they cannot find where the money went.
Yeah.
I am pretty sure one day if somebody put their attention to Canuck, the name of the artificial intelligence that Canadian immigration is using, it would be the same. They wouldn't find where it started and where the money went, judging
Jane,
by how it works.
This is, I think for many Canadians, I don't wanna speak on behalf of all, but this is a real shocker because I would say many of us have no idea that this is happening because it doesn't directly impact us. What would you say are some of the major biases that you're seeing in how the federal government processes immigration, um, and that leads to your firm and others taking this to the appeals court at the federal courts?
You know, the answer to this question, once you are giving me the question, my mind is rushing, trying to find the precedents that I had.
Of course.
So uh, this question brings me to one case that I was representing in court. The case was of, I don't remember these people were from Ukraine, but they were claiming refugee as Jews,
Wow.
and I'm Jewish, and the reason there was, so first of all they claimed refugees Jews, whereas the documents were Russian, and we presented to the court the proof that a lot of Jewish people back in the former Soviet Union were claiming to be Russian.
Oh,
Right? So I can
right.
tell you, my last name is Katkova. I was
Mhm,
born Shipshelon, which is a very Jewish last name.
mhm.
But in order to be accepted to the university when I was 16, because there was a huge anti-Semitism, I changed the name to my mom's last name, who was also Jewish, but whose name was Russian sounding.
Right, right,
Okay,
right.
so
Wow.
so
And
so
this is
this
in Russia?
family, sorry?
This is in Russia, Jane?
I'm from Latvia.
Latvia.
So this family had to prove during the court that they are really practicing Judaism.
Wow.
We and I cannot tell you enough how much they knew about Judaism, much more than I do. Okay, and I am from a very religious father.
Mm.
I'm a daughter of a very religious father. They really literally knew what I don't know and what many, you know, civil kind of Jews, right? Those
Mhm.
who
Yeah.
do not practice,
Mhm.
uh, don't know. So they were answering every imaginable question. Of course, questioning is first starting from the counsel, and then it's starting from the judge. They answered every single question. She
Wow.
gave them a refusal because she had the discretion. She,
Wow.
the judges, the officers are given an enormous amount of power.
Wow.
That's what they are using when they are making decisions. But as we human beings are, there are people who are analytical. There are people who are basing their decisions on facts, and they are simply bad people. When
Yeah.
she delivered no, and it was bench no, it was she delivered her no at the conclusion of the court. I literally couldn't believe my ears. I couldn't believe
Wow.
it because they were perfect. Of course, we appealed it. Of course, we did the transcript of the whole hearing, and we won. But
Wow.
but this is the example of why these people are biased, because people are people. For some reason, I think maybe she didn't like Jews,
That's the question
but
I would
she
have.
wouldn't talk about it, right? For
That
some reason, the men who are in sitting in the Canadian embassy in Beirut, for some reason they don't like Armenians or Syrians
Syrian.
who come to be interviewed by them, and this has become actually a series of refusals. Where I told you we took the case to court because people don't have money. People in Syria have no money to
Oh,
hire a representative. Or even if they are Lebanon, it's a very poor country.
yeah.
They don't work because they are refugees. They don't have money to pay us. We cannot do it for free because we have to engage a huge amount of effort to do it. We cannot take every case pro bono because then we will have to close,
Yes.
right? They don't have this money. So this guy had a brother in the US, and the brother retained us.
Wow.
But those who were before him, they had nobody to represent them. They had no money to retain.
So, Jane, this just blows my mind that immigration officers and judges have this level of power for refusal. Because if in fact you are if you are in fact anti-Semitist, or if you have racist views, you think that that would be couched in the federal policy to say it's one thing for Christopher to be racist towards Syrians in Lebanon, but there actually is a potential policy that governs Christopher's actions as an immigration officer. But it seems like that doesn't seem to be followed at all.
I don't think how this vetting process goes when people are hired to work for immigration, but I can tell you for sure that there is no system in place that would be verifying whether the person is racist or not, whether the person is conservative or liberal, whether the person is pro or against gay. And I can tell you that more than anywhere, besides dealing with these cases every day, I met it in CBSA when people were people the Canadian Border Service Agency, which is deporting people, right?
Hmm.
So and these officers, they are all given the same amount of discretion,
Hmm.
right? So usually on the first level, you are dealing with same officers with same amount of discretion. So there would be some who would be so adamant to deport you
Hmm.
that they would do everything. They would look into your face, listen to your reasons, even understand if we come with my clients that there's a case ongoing, and they would say, I don't care. Okay. But where others, okay, and I've had cases like this as well, where it was real humans, right? I had a case when a lady was in a serious treatment for cancer, and her husband had to be deported, and the officer gave them a break for 6 months without us taking any action.
Wow.
Taking any action, and we completed his case, and we were good. Okay.
Wow.
So I had different experiences. I
Yeah.
would never tell you that all my experiences were bad. They were different, and
Hmm.
they only confirmed the fact that we are dealing with human beings.
Yes. Yes.
Judges are human beings, officers are human beings, senior officers are human beings, and this is the reality of it.
Jane, I definitely hear that point. We are dealing with human beings.
Yeah.
That goes without saying. The thing, though, is that when it comes to our judicial system here in Canada, United States, we put a high level of trust in our judges because we expect them to not only be human beings, but to be impartial in their assessment as a judge. But from what I gather, from what you're telling me and the examples you've shared, there is no separation between bias as an individual and their actions as a judge. It seems to blend together.
Okay, I would like to make a distinction because it's important. I was when I was talking to you about officers who
Officers, my
deliver
apologies.
refusals.
Yes.
I told you about the judge, the member of the Immigration and Refugee Board who delivered a refusal and the amount of discretion. But when you take it to the federal court, and when the case is really strong, and this is going to judicial system, when the case is really strong, 99% or 90% that they would see the problem.
Okay.
And in that higher upper level judicial system, that's where we're seeking the justice,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because that's our only resource where we can actually seek the justice, where they are really reading. Not
Yeah.
to say that it's 100% approval, but in in cases where we see that there is a definite, clear, very, very, very crystal clear mistake, they would actually agree with you. So and once immigration sees it, that's when they come with the offer to settle
Yeah.
and not to proceed to the actual hearing, because if the actual
Never say no.
hearing takes place and we win the case, then it's a precedent.
Correct.
Precedent is a good thing to have
Yes,
for
because you
us
can.
practitioners. Yeah.
But Jane, here's my question to you on that. It should never get to that level because, as you said before, like these individuals are already having to put up tens of thousands of dollars to not only come to Canada and start their lives, but also to hire yourself and the services that you provide. And so Why is it that it's getting to this level and the federal government through its court system is recognizing that and saying, you know what, 99% they're right, let's just settle. Like, no, 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 no. This, why not do an introspective to say, how come this keeps coming up and getting to this level? You know what I mean?
No, I really, I cannot refuse myself to tell you the funniest story that happened in our practice. I'm sure that you and the listeners will laugh, will smile maybe a little. So, the story didn't start well because a father of our client died. That was expected. Unfortunately, he died. But before he died, and not knowing that he was dying, we submitted for him the application for Canadian citizenship. So after that, he was diagnosed and he was dying, and he died. So after he passed away, because we pay for the application for Canadian citizenship, we requested the return of the money. We submitted the certificate of death, and we said, guys, you have never started processing the application. Give us the money back. The family needs the money. And the officer wrote back to us. She said, I don't mind. We will withdraw your application. We will return the processing fee that you have paid. However, here's a form attached that you should that he should sign. And when
What?
it was, we were just dying laughing.
How
And
could they even think that?
can you imagine? And so we're writing to her. It's amazing that you are so willing to actually withdraw the application. However, we are applying on his behalf because we were reps on record, and this man is dead. He cannot sign. He cannot sign the form
Oh
because
my
he's
gosh.
not existing. He's not alive. So we're sending that, and she is sending it back to us one more time,
No.
telling us the applicant should sign. And at that stage, we were just like, it is impossible.
This is madness.
Impossible. It cannot be happening.
This
But
is absolute madness, Jane. This
it
is
is
madness.
madness. So we ended up getting the money because when we wrote for the third time, again putting the copy of the death certificate and saying that what she is requesting is beyond incomprehensible, they actually returned the money. But it happened here in my office from which I am talking to you, and I think it speaks volumes to what is actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
And who said that everyone who is working for immigration is smart?
Yeah.
Is it in the juries? Is it?
Yeah.
So I really don't have anything else to add. I don't have an answer to your question, basically.
Jane, no, you're shedding light on how important hiring practices are and how life and death, no pun intended in this case, but how life and death, the decisions that officers make, are real and they have real consequences. Um, I wanted to ask you, Jane, and you don't have to get into specifics, but how frequent have you found it where you have to appeal the government's decision? Is it quite frequent?
Yeah, it is quick. It is quite frequent.
Wow.
It is quite frequent, and very often people come to us to appeal. They have done things on their own, or they have done things with somebody else, but because we have a good record, they come to us just to appeal because they are tired. They are tired of refusals, right? So just like this, it happened with this Pakistani lady's Canadian relatives, right?
Mm.
After 3 times and 3 refusals, and they did not allow her to come when her father was dying. How many more times should you try? So you want to engage. You want to engage professionals in order to kind of try to see whether you can finalize these efforts. How many years should you wait to see the grave of your father and your Canadian relatives without any intention to claim refugee in Canada and with every intention to go back home, right? So
yeah. Jane, I mentioned, I asked at the beginning about political motives, and I know we kind of danced around that because you've seen it in your practice I'm sure you have over 20 years. And just one thing that constantly strikes me is as governments have priorities, I think that would filter down to immigration. And I'm thinking right now with the war in Ukraine, the conflict in the Middle East, etc. I can easily see a political motive to looking at those regions of the world perhaps more uh, with a more special eye than other regions that are also facing civil war, famine, strife, conflict with less enthusiasm. Have you seen that play out in the immigration space, or is that just my conjecture?
Mm, I have actually heard uh, this topic being touched.
Mm,
Um, I think I really, okay, there's something which I would like to mention. There are so many programs that Canada comes with that it's hard for me to come to
yeah.
cover everyone. But I can tell you that in the last years, uh, Canada had a program for Iranians that allow Iranians who once all this the unrest has started to take place, they are giving Iranians the open work permits. There was a program which just closed for Turkish people after the earthquake.
Mm,
There is a program now for Palestinians and Israelis due to the war in the region.
right.
And yes, of course, there's the program of Ukrainians. I cannot comment on other regions of the world. I didn't hear much about special programs because of earthquakes, and maybe there's a lot of truth in what you're saying. But I wouldn't want to touch upon something which I don't
Yeah,
know exhaustively. Okay.
correct.
I think that Canada, my daughter lives in England,
Hmm.
and my daughter heads a big PR company, a political PR company. She thinks that Canada is much more fair than England in relation to immigrants.
Wow.
She is absolutely of this opinion.
Mm,
I also think that Canada is
mm,
trying, right? It did receive Syrians. We know that it did, right?
mhm,
It did receive people from Afghanistan, much more, by the way, than the U.S.
right.
Okay, so there were programs for it was 3 years ago, right?
Hmm.
When the whole situation happened, when there was a program in Canada for Afghani people.
Hmm.
Okay, so uh, uh, I think that they are trying. I think sometimes they are over trying, to be honest.
Hmm.
Sometimes they are under trying,
Yeah.
but in general, maybe in comparison to other countries, Canada is not doing that bad.
So Jane, the reason I ask that is because at the beginning of our conversation, we you talked about the money that an international student needs and the level of proficiency in English that they'll also need. And to me, that means that that also requires um, a schooling system in the country to teach English. It also requires that individual to have access to tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah,
And for some countries where GDP is less than a few $1,000s,
yeah,
that's just not only impossible, that's nowhere close to impossible or close to possible for the individual, especially in countries where women aren't allowed into high schools or into higher education. So the thought of them applying is just not even in their realm of thought. So
yeah,
that's where I'm starting to think like, I wonder, can't Canada kind of think about this more holistically, because we're already selecting from a very well-to-do person coming
yeah,
to Canada.
yeah. I don't, uh, I'm not sure my comment on it would be very well substantiated. However, what from what I know, okay,
Mhm,
colleges, even public colleges, right? So there are two types of colleges which provide education to foreign students, but also to Canadian students. Public colleges like Seneca, Brown College, and
mhm,
the list goes on, and private colleges, many of which were incepted from the first place to
wow,
make money of foreign students. So
wow,
usually the tuition fee in the private colleges are significantly lesser
mm,
than in the public colleges, right? But these colleges are now closed.
right,
So with the new regulations pertaining to the student visas, Private colleges have no chance, period.
Wow.
They are leaving them no chance whatsoever. Okay, because they don't grant work permits to the students who have come to study in those colleges.
I see.
So in terms of the cost creation
Mm-hmm.
for the programs by the public colleges, I don't know what it takes. I don't know why it costs 15,000. Maybe it's the salaries of the teachers. It's hard for me to say.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, but I would need to mention here that uh, Canadian students also pay. They just pay significantly less, and they
Correct.
can use OSAP. I
Correct.
don't know how much less, by the way,
Yeah.
but for sure they are paying maybe half, maybe a little over than a half of what international students are paying. While the education is the same,
Yeah.
it's being taught by the same teachers in the very same classrooms, right?
Yes, Jane. When I was in university, it cost $4,000 to $5,000
Yeah.
for myself, but that was 15 years ago, so it's
I'm
probably a
sure,
little bit more.
yeah, the amount has grown for Canadians as well.
Yeah.
It's nearly near
Mm-hmm.
15,000 that they are charging from the foreign students. I guess it's their way. It's
Yeah.
their way of making money. I hard
Correct.
to say, but the
Exactly.
fact,
It's a
the
money-making thing, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Jane, I know we have limited time. I wanted to chat with you about something the government said about capping international students, and they said this is to help alleviate the pressure we're having on housing. And I know you said at the beginning, having 20 plus thousand in your bank account to show that you can survive in Canada. We both know living in Toronto, 20 grand is definitely good money, but rents, mortgages, all that, so everything's going up. So it's like, that's good, but how long will that last? Um, Question for you. Do you see a direct connection between international students and the pressure on the housing market? I mean, it's out of your wheelhouse, I know, but I feel like you have a good sense of the issues that international students face when they get here.
I honestly think it's appalling what they are
Yeah.
doing. For numerous reasons. The argument that they have put forward, in my opinion, is baseless because I know how the students live. Okay, so
Mhm.
those who are coming from the rich families, they just rent a condo downtown or nearby their campus, and they would
Mhm.
pay an unlimited amount of money because their
Mhm.
parents can furnish it. But the absolute majority of these students, they are renting one room in a multiple rooms house
Mhm.
where no Canadians would come to live.
Mhm.
Okay, how many Canadians do we know who, and unless they are immigrants and they have just arrived and they have no money whatsoever, like they are barely making their ends meet? How many Canadians do we know who would agree to come to live in a room which is on the same floor with another 5 rooms, and you would use maybe maximum 2 washrooms?
Oh my God.
Not many. So these
Yeah.
are usually the premises that these students are renting, or basements. How many
Mm.
Canadians do we know who would readily jump into a basement, okay, and pay over $1,000? Not many, but they cramp in those basements, right? They get as
Mhm.
well 3 rooms, 3 students, 1 bathroom, one
Mhm.
tiny kitchen in the basement. That's how
Wow.
many immigrants, or just those who come on work permit, that's how they live.
Wow.
Okay, so I honestly think that it is a crime, okay, to do it, but from and I will tell you why it is a crime. Not only the argument is stupid, in my opinion, but also these people who come to Canada to study, the majority of them are so motivated to
Mm.
actually make something of themselves in Canada, to immigrate to Canada. Some are going back,
Mhm.
but
Wow.
some want to remain here. So they have Canadian education, they get Canadian experience, and they are motivated through being employed to actually receive their PR. These people work
Mhm.
like no Canadians do. And I am not saying that Canadians should work the amount of time and the types of work that these kids do. But I'm saying that these people are the future of this country, just like our kids are. They are more motivated to succeed and to make something out of themselves than not. And I can tell you that I have seen so many incredible, incredible success stories. Incredible, of those kids who have come here having practically nothing but the parents who helped them to come and pay for school. I saw situations where parents would go bankrupt and were no longer able to continue supporting them financially, or would get divorced, right, and would lose the interest. And these kids who would be in Canada from 17 years old at 22, 23, figuring out, working every jobs. Why? Because they wanted to stay. And I am getting goosebumps telling you about it. And because my work is very emotional. It's not only, flags and confetti. It's a lot of human beings who are in very different situations. So that's my answer to your question.
Jane, I want to end our conversation on that. I would love to hear a really inspiring story you have for all Canadians, regardless of age, of someone who's come here against all odds and have made a life for themselves.
I will tell you one story that I heard yesterday. It's not about, they're not Canadians yet. They came to me to become Canadians. Oh, I will tell you two stories. They, because they are the latest. But they will be both about Ukrainians. Okay. I hope it's okay, because it doesn't
That's
matter. They
fine.
are as foreigners as everybody
Exactly.
else. So the
Exactly.
lady who came to see me yesterday about PR, she told me a terrible story about how when the war has started, she thought it was an earthquake, and her husband took them through the country, okay, without gas, without under the bombs. It's a real war. So they came to Canada in May of 2022, only several months after the war has started. She used the program right away. She told me that they had literally $100 on them. Two kids. The son got so scared during the war that he got a rash throughout his body. And the kid was 5 years old. And the daughter is 12, started peeing her bed because she was scared. That every person reacts differently on the war. So they had very bad experience in the beginning with the hosts that offered to keep them in their home for 2 weeks. But they met Canadians who offered him a job because he was a truck driver back home. Today, this man is working on a garbage truck, making $120,000 per year.
What?
This lady was here in my office yesterday. It was my last appointment yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah.
120,000.
120,000, and he is also a mechanic, and I was just so happy. So incredibly happy to hear it, right? So they are not PRs, they just have a work permit. But look what they have done. I will tell you a story about one of my colleagues. He is from Syria. In Syria, from Aleppo, actually. When the war, and he is actually in the office nearby, right across the small corridor. When the war has started, he was in a law school in Aleppo. Aleppo was, by the way, I'm not sure whether you know or not, it was a beautiful, prosperous, very nicely built, with beautiful architecture city, totally destroyed. Together with his family, they ran to Lebanon, where they got sponsored by a church group to Canada. When he came to my office many years ago, he didn't look good. He didn't smell good.
Mm.
He was just so eager to work. And when we spoke about legal part of his knowledge, I was impressed with the enthusiasm
Mm.
that he was answering my questions. It was the enthusiasm he had when answering my questions. So bottom line, he has been with me now for 7 years. He is now applying for law school. He is my major case manager. He
Wow.
learned, he has a brilliant legal mind.
Mm.
Brilliant. He looks so beautiful. He builds a small collection of not very expensive watches. He dresses amazingly. Clients love him. He
Oh,
got married and
wow.
he is about to enter law school. To
Wow.
me, this is one of beautiful stories
Mhm.
that I am so blessed to be observing, doing what I am doing every day.
Jane, that is yeah, that's giving me goosebumps here too because, so many of us just don't know how hard it is, how hard it is for people to make it, but when they do make it, you can't take away that work ethic. You can't take away that attitude towards life. I had someone tell me, I want to do business with people who've had serious losses because they know what it's like to come back. But if you've never had that before, it's hard to do business with someone like that. So all these stories are so important. And I'm going to do whatever I can, Jane. I had a whole list of questions to ask you. We didn't get through 75% of it, and I feel like we need to. And I want to learn more about your experiences, particularly at the appeals court, and learning about what you've seen so that more Canadians can know about our immigration system and some of the real challenges with it and how we can actually move forward and and go to government and say we need to see some changes here for the benefit of our country because our country's at stake for the future of our country.
How many seconds do I have left?
Just about a few minutes, but you could take your time.
I just want to tell you the most incredible case that just came to my office in December, because it's almost impossible to believe how in disarray they function. So this gentleman he has never been my client, but he came to Canada in 2008 as a refugee claiming refugee from Kazakhstan. Since then, he has received his approval. He got a convention refugee status. He became a PR, and he also became a Canadian citizen.
Hmm.
He also
Wow.
became a Canadian citizen.
Amazing.
He has been going back and forth to his country of origin, Kazakhstan, which he wasn't supposed to do, by the way, because once you
Yeah.
get the status of a convention refugee, you are not supposed to avail yourself to the danger that you have been running from initially, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
but he did, and uh, during one time of his return to Canada, he had a conversation with the CBSA officer who was questioning him about where are you coming from. He said, I'm coming back from Kazakhstan. Maybe somebody didn't tell him about it. So he
Yeah.
honestly answered the question, I'm coming back from Kazakhstan. So he was let go. It was in 1920 when he was coming back. When he was coming back, he I think he was married by the time. He married a lady in Kazakhstan. So COVID happened. He waited to submit an application to sponsor her to Canada. So he submitted the application to sponsor her to Canada, and he received a letter with which he walked into my office in December. That letter was from the Ministry of Citizenship, in which he was being told that we are letting you know that you are being stripped of the Canadian citizenship
Wow.
because you have traveled, because
Got
you
it.
have been stripped
Right.
of your status of PR,
Mhm.
because you
Got it.
have been stripped of your status of a convention refugee because you have traveled to Kazakhstan. He
Right.
had no clue about it.
Wow.
He
Gee.
did not know. Okay, so
Mhm.
somebody at CBSA stripped all his status without letting him know and without giving him the ability to appeal. So this man, a Canadian citizen, is now like the criminals of war, being stripped already. They told him goodbye.
Wow.
right? Being stripped of his Canadian passport. That's how discombobulated the system is. That is the reason I told you the story. Where the right hand doesn't know what the left is doing. Okay? And this is my answer to your question. What kind of measures they should undertake in order to actually fix the remedy, the incredible discombobulation, is out of my expertise.
And Jane, it's so sad to say this, but as Canadians, the thing that gets on the news is how welcoming we are to immigrants, how open our country is, and how accepting we are. But when it comes to the administration and the actual nuts and bolts of the system, that never makes the front page of any newspaper in Canada at all. And an idea of a politician going in and trying to rehaul the whole system may come across as someone who's xenophobic, someone who doesn't like immigration, someone who doesn't like immigrants, when in fact the system needs to be completely rehauled from what you're telling me, which is just, it's very scary to think that that's happening in Canada.
I should say that there's only a fraction of what I could have told you. However, I should absolutely also mention that there are good things as well happening. So we should give weight to both sides of the story, which basic fairness requires, right? So let's do that as well. But for sure and absolutely, the system is severely discombobulated and should be fixed. I absolutely agree with you.
Jane, this was amazing. You just scratched the surface for us on the immigration system here in Canada. I believe this won't be our last conversation because I have a list of questions to still ask you. So I'll work with your team on figuring out another topic, another conversation with you. But thanks for shedding light on this, and I can't wait for our second conversation.
My very big pleasure. Thank you for having me, and hello to every listener.